Hello friends, my name is Marinés and I bought a lot of books in January. Usually I do my hauls quarterly, but I don't want to keep accumulating books and not hauling them because then it's going to result in a video that is forever minutes long. The first thing that I bought this year before I actually sat down and really had a look at my habits and set goals for myself was Passenger by Alexandra Bracken, and I actually pre-ordered this, and in keeping with my terrible streak with pre-orders, I haven't read it yet. This is a YA fantasy science fiction novel that has gotten a fair amount of buzz around BookTube, so I won't bore you with any description other than it's about a boy and a girl who time travel. Next, I have St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves by Karen Russell. This is a collection of short stories that all have a magical realism or fantasy twist. I originally read this in 2012, and though I rated it 4 stars, it is a collection of stories that has really stayed with me. Russell's stories are strange in a good way, and her writing is very precise and smart. The theme in this book is quite strong, so it's a collection of short stories that I wouldn't recommend to sit down and read straight through, because in that way it can get a little bit redundant. However, I really enjoyed reading these in between other things, and I wanted a copy for my shelf so that I could revisit it in that way, just taking one story at a time to break up other things that I'm reading. Next, I have Howl's Moving Castle, House of Many Ways, and Castle in the Air by Diana Wynne Jones. These are children's fantasy books, and Howl's Moving Castle was actually the first thing that I read in 2016. I just appreciated the characters and the quirky setting so much. This story is about a girl named Sophie who is cursed into being an old woman, so she sets off to find help from a wizard named Howl. When I read this, I borrowed a copy from the library, but then promptly ordered my own copy, and then figured I might as well round out the rest of the series. I do want to read these next two in the next couple of months, so I'll try to hold myself to that. Next, The Snow Child by Éowyn Ivey. This is a modern retelling of a Russian fairy tale about a girl made of snow that comes to life. I read this in 2012 and marked it as 4 stars and put it on my wish list, and it finally made its way off my wish list and into my cart and now into my possession. For all that I felt and wrote in my review about this story holding you at arm's length, all of these years later, I can very much remember what this book made me feel. The setting in a snowy, isolated Alaska is almost the perfect way to describe the tone of the story as well. It's a little icy and a bit withdrawn, sprawling, ambling, but overall very beautifully written. It's also a story that I very much want to reread to just see if the second time through I feel more connected to it. Next, The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fears by Patrick Rothfuss. I've been talking about this book a little bit around here. This is a fantasy novel that I read in January, and I'm just completely enamored with the rich world and the vibrant and bright characters. At its heart, it's simply the story of a man telling the story of his life, but it's full of rich details, and it fills out its pages with legends and lore, and I just appreciate it so much. I have not yet read the second book, but only because I'm purposefully putting it off. It's one of those things where I don't want it to end quite yet, and I know that there is a forthcoming book, but I'm not ready. Next, The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. So I'm sure that nobody noticed, but in the craziness of the end of last year, I actually didn't wrap up the books that I read in December. This adult thriller was one of those books. I am actually working on a full review video of this book, however, because even though it wasn't the greatest thing that I ever read, it really is a piece that you can talk about because the characters are so unlikable, and because of the unreliable narrator and just the plot devices that the author uses to keep the narrator and us in the dark. I gave this 3.5 stars, and I usually don't purchase books that I rate that way, but because the experience of reading it was such a good one, even if the story itself was not without its flaws, I really wanted my own copy of it. Next, Gregor the Overlander, Gregor and the Prophecy of the Bane, and Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods, the first 3 books in the Underland Chronicles by Suzanne Collins. I read these 3 books in 2014 and immediately put the box set in my wish list, and as you can tell probably from some of these, after Christmas I allowed myself to grab some things from my wish list. I almost bought the box set until I went on Book Depository and saw these covers, and I just really loved them. So only the first 3 were in stock. I have to go back and get the others when they become available, but I have these so far. This is a middle grade fantasy series that follows a young boy named Gregor who accidentally falls into an underland. The underworld is full of rats and bats and giant cockroaches, but also people who have been living there for a very long time. This is middle grade, so it can be simply written or literally little bit obvious, but I just love Gregor and his little sister Boots as characters, and I love their sibling relationship. Also, Suzanne Collins explores these themes of war and prejudice and how those things get passed on through generations, so it really does have a lot to say. Next, The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. This is a contemporary fiction novel that I read last year. This book tends to draw some mixed reviews because the story itself is very embedded in culture, in Dominican culture and immigrant culture and first generation American culture. So if you don't get that, it puts up a wall between you and the story and what Diaz is very brilliantly exploring in the story. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. And beneath the crazy things that happen to Oscar, there's a lot of truth about what it's like to be a first generation American, especially if you identify more as American than anything else. This book immediately became very important to me, and I'm happy to finally have a copy for my shelves. Next, Alex and Ada volumes 1, 2, and 3. I honestly cannot remember what inspired me to pick these up, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say that someone mentioned it in a video and I ordered it. I really do like graphic novel series though that have an end. It's like when TV shows have run their course and then you can marathon them, so knowing that it was only 3 volumes, I'm sure that that inspired me to go ahead and just do this. I have read volume 1 so far, and it's about a man who acquires some artificial intelligence, and I don't know how much else that I can say without it getting into spoilery territory, but I will give you my full thoughts on this in the next little mini wrap-up that I do. Next, Signal to Noise by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I read this YA magical realism novel at the recommendation of Rincey from Rincey Reads, and I'm so glad that I did. This story takes place in Mexico City, and it follows 3 friends who discover that they can harness magic from music. It's a very tender story, and despite the element of magic, it's really about relationships and people and growing up. I really enjoyed it, and I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, All the Truth That's in Me by Julie Berry. I read this YA historical fiction novel in 2013, and I rated it 5 stars. And while I remember a lot of what happens here, I'm also very curious to reread it and see if that opinion still stands kind of now after booktube and being the more critical reader than I am now. This story is about a girl who is kidnapped from a small town and then is returned 2 years later permanently mutilated. There is action that drives the rest of the story, but a lot of it also has to do with finding out what happened to her and seeing her deal with it. And finally, I have My Brilliant Friend, The Story of a New Name, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, and The Story of the Lost Child, all by Elena Ferrante. I've read the first 2 books and I am absolutely blown away by the power of this story. These novels that focus on the friendship between 2 girls aren't perfect by any means, and this one actually got off to a very slow start for me, but the more time that I spend with the story and the more time that I spend away from it, the more it buries itself into my feelings. This has definitely been the most pleasant surprise for me of this year, and after I finished reading the first book, I immediately bought the first, second, and third book, and then after I finished the second book, I was like, I need the 4th book as well. So my collection is complete. I don't know when I'll be reading the last 2 because again, these are ones that I'm now like, maybe I need to take this slower. I don't want them to end. As always, if you've read any of these books or if you want to know any more about them, let's chat down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. This is heavy.